to a darker blue. Don't let us hang around this town and let what others say come true. We're just good for nothing, they all figure. A boy's grown up shiftless jigger. Now we can't hardly.
Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Darker Than Blue. And I'm muted, apparently. Why? How am I muted? Oh, there we are. We're muted on Zoom. Way too many things to be keeping track of here on Darker Than Blue. But thank you for our producer extraordinaire for keeping me on track. Yo, thanks everybody. Welcome to another episode of Darker Than Blue on this cold and wintry and some would say appropriately seasoned weather here in Washington, D.C. But, you know, there's stuff going on in other places in the world that are not appropriately seasoned, of course, unless you take into account climate change. And that's obviously what's going on the West Coast right now. The fires that are out of control in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, this is not out in the hills somewhere. This is not out in the brush in California. The fires are in Los Angeles. They are burning through entire neighborhoods, Palisades Park. This is if you're happy like I am that there is finally snow on the East Coast, people on the West Coast are experiencing climate change for real. And quite honestly, so have we, because it should have snowed long before now on the East Coast where there are supposed to be seasons. But you know, climate change being what it is, meaning it's real, is showing us exactly what life is going to be like for us on this planet if the people who are responsible for climate change, which is not working class and poor people, it's not the people in the global south, it's not the people on the continent, it is the military, it is the corporations. Until they do something different, it's the fossil fuel industry. They're the ones that have caused this. The human-fueled climate change. No, it's corporate-fueled climate change. It's militarism-fueled climate change. It's imperialism-fueled climate change. Just like everything else that we are facing in this country, in this world right now. And dear listeners, my friends, one of the things I wanted to talk about today kind of dovetails into a weird story that seems silly on the face of it, but there's really some serious stuff behind it. And there's serious stuff behind it because of other things that are going on in the world that we need to pay attention to. But the thing I wanted to talk about was this bizarre fascination that the right has revived now with child sex trafficking. And we're going to have a couple people on in a few minutes. And I'm sure that some of you who have been watching on YouTube on Black Liberation Media, you saw who the guest is. So y'all don't spoil it for our radio listeners. But I'm going to have some people on in a few minutes to talk about a real life issue of the violation of the human rights of children, something that is actually happening, right? Child sex trafficking really does happen. It is a real thing. It is a real problem. But you do know that the right wing didn't care about human trafficking until Pizzagate, right? So Elon Musk posting on his platform, which I will never call what he called it, posting on Twitter that the United States needs to liberate the UK over their handling, or he claims mishandling, of an enormous human trafficking scandal that happened about 15, 20 years ago in the UK in a working class, mostly white, but not all white neighborhood. It was a mining community, of course. Margaret Thatcher closed down the mines, and then a solid middle class, working class mining community turned into a poor community because of the neoliberal closing of the mines and the ending of a lot of Britain's government-sponsored programs and guaranteed work and labor and wage requirements, right? So the neighborhood becomes a poor neighborhood. It's not working class anymore because there's no more work. Mines were closed. So then there was a big scandal about a ring of immigrant men who were taxi drivers who were grooming and pimping out young girls in the neighborhood, right? And there was a mini series that the BBC did about it that I actually happened to watch it. I watched that mini series like 2 years ago, I think. And I can't remember the name of it now, but it was like a 3-part limited series where they went through the story of this. It was a ring of Pakistani immigrant men who ran this trafficking ring of young girls who were not all white. But in the documentary, in the BBC documentary, all the girls that were highlighted were white. So they made it look like all the girls that were targeted by this ring of Pakistani traffickers were they were all going after the little white British girls. Well, that is actually not true. They trafficked East Asian girls too. But the East Asian girls, because of their culture, they were afraid to come forward because they didn't want to be shamed for being raped, right? Because of some of the negative elements in their culture. So, and of course, the British press didn't care about those East Asian girls. They were mad about the white girls. And they weren't even that mad about the white girls. They were mad about the fact that it was immigrants who ran this human trafficking ring. That is why Elon Musk posted about this scandal in the UK from 15, 20 years ago. That's what he was talking about when he's when he's saying, oh, should the US liberate the UK government? Because in his excuse is that they did not handle this child sex trafficking ring scandal well. I guess the current PM was involved in the prosecution of that case back then, and Musk is unhappy because I don't know why he's unhappy, y'all. I don't know why he is even bringing this up, because the case was adjudicated in the UK. The case was adjudicated to the point that investigations were done. It was found that the council of the town that the scandal happened in knew about this doggone near decades long ring. This thing had been going on for a long time. It from the late 80s to the mid 90s. The council of the town that it happened in knew about it because complaints were made to the council. People in the council didn't do anything about it because, number one, they were such punks. They were like, oh, that we don't want people saying that we're racist, so we're not going to do anything about this. But then really it was more of a class issue, because these were, again, remember, I told you that these were the poor folks in this town. This was not a working class town anymore, because the place that provided the work, the mines, that closed. So there was no work for these families anymore. So these people were poor. These were poor people. And the reason the council in the town didn't do anything about this ring was because it was happening to a bunch of poor girls. That's why. That's the other reason why. They made it. They said, oh, we didn't want to be accused of racism. Okay, I would buy that for the first complaint. But every other complaint that came to the council for years after that, it didn't have anything to do with them being afraid of being accused of being racist. It had everything to do with those girls who were targeted by that ring being from poor families. So the council in that town didn't care. They didn't care. And they let that ring go on for years until the London press got wind of it, and some higher authorities were called, and then the Metropolitan Police and I think Scotland Yard got involved and investigated. Then they uncover the whole thing. They replace everybody on the council. They get rid of the whole council of the town. I think they replaced the police chief, the deputy, a bunch of other cops. People got fired, people lost their jobs, all kinds of stuff. So, and yes, people went to prison, men and women, because there were women involved and they weren't all East Asian women. They weren't Pakistani women too. So the people who were involved and who allowed this to happen were absolutely dealt with by British authorities. Were they lined up against a wall and dealt with? No. But the matter was investigated. People were sent to prison. People lost their jobs. People were, yeah. So that happened years ago. So Musk is dredging up something that doesn't have any relevance to anything that is going on today, but he's doing it for a reason, because he's tapping into this obsession over child sex trafficking in particular, that the right cooked up with this Pizzagate business. Oops, so close to cussing on this Pizzagate business. Yeah, see, it just gets me that mad. Business. That's what I want to say. And the producer's in there laughing at me because he sees this struggle every week. But they did handle it, but Musk is bringing this up because he wants to manufacture consent for this idea that now under the Trump administration, the US government is going to use its power to just take over anything it wants, like it hasn't already been doing, like the government hasn't already been doing that. Look at what they just did in Syria under Biden. Trump, if they do try to coup the UK, which, look, I'm not even upset about. I mean, because everybody else, the imperialists have cooed. I just kind of figure it's kind of natural. They don't have anybody else that they could coup. They might as well start cooing themselves and each other and leave the rest of us alone, maybe. But the issue isn't that Musk is saying that he's upset with the British government because of it. He's not really upset with the British government. He's just really testing out. He's what do we want to call it? Like when your pet pushing boundaries. That's what it is. He is pushing his boundaries. He's testing the boundaries. He's trying to see how far he can go with telegraphing the plans of the US empire. Because look, don't, as silly as some of this stuff might sound coming from Trump and his acolytes, don't dismiss them out of hand just because the things they are saying sound ridiculous. Do I really think they're going to try to coup the UK? No, I don't think they're going to try to coup the UK. But I mean, it's not like they have to, because look at the relationship that the US and the UK have as it is right now. The UK doesn't do anything that the US doesn't want them to do. So you might as well say the UK is already couped, in control, being controlled by the US. So the US doesn't have to send any military there. But this idea that Musk puts forward about we're gonna liberate the UK government from its current tyrannical government because the people running the UK government now allowed this horrible thing to happen with the children of UK. They don't care about that. He doesn't care about the children of UK, just like these people didn't care about the children of the United States when they brought up this ridiculous Pizzagate foolishness. They don't care about children. They never did. They don't care about child sex trafficking. I know this because they were not concerned about our children being the targets, the overwhelming majority targets of child sex trafficking before they came up with this Pizzagate stuff. All this big deal these people made about saving the children. It wasn't about our children, y'all. Because you and I have, in our families and our people, we have talked about our missing kids, the children, our children who go missing, and our missing and murdered Indigenous sisters and children. We've been talking about our missing people for years, decades, before these people even knew about what a Comet Ping Pong Pizza in DC was that they claimed a child sex ring was being run out of the basement of by the Democrats. These people didn't do that. They didn't bring that up because, or make that up because they were concerned about children. No, they made that up because they hate the Democrats that much. And as much as I hate the Democrats, I wouldn't have said that. There's plenty to hate the Democrats over that's real, that's true. But they made up this ridiculous lie, right? And they turned it into this phenomenon that now Musk is still trying to draw energy from, now that he's going to have this official role in the Trump administration, telegraphing these ridiculous ideas that don't make any sense. Nobody's going to coup the UK government. Nobody has to. All the president of the United States has to do is pick up the phone and make a call to the prime minister of the UK and be like, what you doing? What did you say? No, you're going to take that back because I don't approve. Click. And that's that. That's the relationship that the US has with the UK. There's no need for a coup. There's no need for the US to liberate the UK government from its tyrannical. The United States government is the tyrannical leader of the UK government. But I'm bringing this up because, and I'm hoping my guests can hop on pretty soon. I think they're having technical difficulties because they're in two different places, and you know how I do. It's never simple, but it's never simple because it's always really good. But there's one, hey, and there's the other, fantastic. I brought this up not because I want to talk about Elon Musk, because God knows I do not want to spend my show talking about Elon Musk. I want to spend this time talking about the real issues of human rights of children that these folks like Musk and Trump and the Pizza Gators and the folks who came up with this ridiculous movie, Sound of Freedom, where the producer is himself a sexual harasser. These people created this obsession over this lie of child sexual abuse that has actually made it harder for US officials who are supposed to be tracking that kind of thing to track actual cases because they have clogged up the phone lines with a bunch of fake cases. I wanted to talk about some real violations of the human rights of children and why we should be focused on these real issues and why they matter to us. So to have this conversation about something that just happened to our children, that this mess that's going on here has obscured, that we do not intend to continue to let it obscure. I'm happy to be joined today by Ajamu Baraka, chair of the coordinating committee of the Black Alliance for Peace, excuse me, and organizer of the People-Centered Human Rights Project. Thank you for joining me, Ajamu. And also, I'm happy to be joined by Claudia Moscoso O'Brien, otherwise known as Clow, our Clow, a member of the Haiti Americas team of the Black Alliance for Peace. Yes, you know how I do. It's BAP all day. BAP, BAP, BAP. Hey, comrades.
Hey, comrade.
Good to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us.
I'm so glad to have you on. And so what has happened? Clow, you just came back from Ecuador, from the city of Guayaquil, where something really horrible has happened. And the way it started out, we didn't quite know what was going on, but it didn't take long for it to get to a horrible result. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to let you fill our listeners and our viewers in to what is going on in Guayaquil, Ecuador.
Yeah, so as you said, Jackie, I just got back from Guayaquil, Ecuador, where on December 8th, 4 boys aged from 11 to 15, 2 of them were brothers, were forcibly disappeared. Initially, they It wasn't known until days later, maybe actually a couple of weeks later, until footage came out of 16 military officials, Air Force members specifically, that had come into, and the like maybe safe way to say it in the beginning, without having any absolute concrete, evidence, right? But were presumed kidnapped by these 16 military personnel. Later, it was found out that I believe it was Christmas Eve on December 24th. 4 incinerated bodies were found near the area where these boys had gone missing, and then on New Year's Eve. So there was an interesting and very, planned media, rollout of this news, right? So when the mass of the people would be celebrating with family for Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, this news comes out. So New Year's Eve, it's confirmed that it's these boys that had gone missing on December 8th in Las Malvinas area region of southern Guayaquil, which is a predominantly African and impoverished community. So since then, of course, the families and the community has been warning and outraged at, one, if it was military personnel, this means it was a state crime, right? And then, so it's not just a forced disappearance, it's also extrajudicial killing, and these bodies were found incinerated, right? And again, these are boys, these are children who were playing football, I guess for the USians, soccer, but I refuse to call it that because that's not what it is.
Because that's not what it is.
For USian audience, right? They have been playing soccer, and we're in South America where that is a very common pastime. And so, yeah, this is a horrific case of state violence, particularly aimed at Afro-Ecuadorean coastal communities and poor neighborhoods. But what also comes into question is that at maybe very sinister background, what is happening is that President Noboa, this U.S. puppet President Noboa, is also rolling out a war on crime and war on drugs, right? And we've heard this before, where it's very much aimed at targeting these communities. It's not, right, they're not necessarily going after, right, the privately owned ports that are actually allowing for the commerce of narcotics, right? And one of these ports is that's privately owned is owned by the Noboa family, right? So what many journalists based in Ecuador and in the region have very accurately called Ecuador as a narco state, you also see that there is, and again, so that is happening, as well as the U.S. recently essentially being handed over the Galapagos Island to expand as a military base. I believe it was back in late September that President Noboa put in into Congress to amend the Constitution to allow foreign bases, which had been previously voted on via popular referendum, and it was the overwhelming majority of the population had voted against amending that piece of the Constitution. So you see this extreme militarization, right? U.S. not just interference, but really just militarization of Ecuador, right? So what this has come out is, or at least obviously what's come out of this tragedy has been a permanent solidarity committee with the boys, the 4 of Guayaquil 4. One of the organizations that's been leading in that struggle with the family members, with human rights organizations, an organization we've been working with is BAP, the Movimiento Afrodescendiente Nacional, for short. So it's yeah, they've been organizing structures, and they've been long-standing community organizers, and in political processes in poor and African communities throughout Ecuador, not just in Quito, right, in Guayaquil, in Esmeraldas, which is over 90% African population. and throughout the different regions, right? So the sur of Guayaquil has been one of the neighborhoods that's been really targeted by this violence, right? And we see this throughout the region that there's like sort of unleashing of violence around the region, but it's very much what's behind this is to use as a justification outcome expansion, or for example in Haiti, right, the RSS mission, they want to put it into a UN peacekeeping mission. Here in Peru, that's been a major thing. That's crimes, assassinations, extortions have been extremely on the rise. But what's not necessarily talked about is that this is happening as Southcom bases are expanding throughout this country, right? So we see with this militarization comes this violence, or maybe it's the other way around, right? Right. So as with capitalism, right, they create the problem to then sell you the solution, right? And in this case, they want active militarization of the region. So I'll let my comrade take over. But that is sort of what has been happening here. And I just got back yesterday.
That is. So let me just to be clear, so people who are listening can be clear. Members of the Ecuadorian military,
right, the Ecuadorian Air Force,
have been found to have kidnapped and murdered these 4 children and set them on fire. At least their bodies were found charred. We know that. And these members of the Air Force, are they now detained? Are they in custody somewhere?
Yes, they're in pretrial detention. They've been formally charged with the forced disappearance of these boys. However, the Novoa government, specifically the Minister of Defense and the Interior Minister, have been very protective of these military personnel, and also saying that going against the judge who did formally charge them with the forced disappearance, and even like not so veiled threats against these human rights organizations and groups that are supporting the family in this case. But there are also so many other forced disappearance cases that have happened in very recent history in Ecuador and in the region.
And that's what I want to ask you about, Ajamu, because this country, this one, the United States, makes a big deal about human rights or democracy being a part of the reason for their interference in other countries' affairs, for coups, for militarism. That's the reason they give for everything. But that doesn't sound like what is going on here. And at the tail end of what's supposed to be a lame duck administration of the Biden administration, this doesn't feel lame duck to me. This feels like a part of just the regular old imperialist U.S. policy. What do people do with this? What do people do with this as it is occurring, seemingly straddling 2 American administrations? What does that mean for how we understand imperialism in the context of electoralism, I guess? Like, as the administrations are changing, how do we look at this? Because I know people are going to be looking at this and saying, well, whose fault this is. That's why I'm asking, because I'm asking the questions that people don't want to ask. People are going to want to ask, well, whose fault is this? Whose fault is it, Ajamu?
Well, in that question, though, sometimes those kind of questions can actually simplify the situation, because what you laid out in your question was, in fact, a revelation of the continuity of U.S. practice, U.S. interests, U.S. policies in the regions that transcends both of the parties, because there's a bipartisan commitment to the continuation of U.S. hegemony in our region, the Americas, and globally. So this is the context that people need to understand. This is the takeaway that people need to have, and that is that we are in a war. That the enemy is quite clear that they are prepared to do whatever is necessary to maintain their global grip on international power. And the fact that Black communities in Ecuador or Colombia or the South Side of Chicago are caught up in that is of little matter to them. In fact, they're seen as collateral damage. So it's important that people understand the terms of the struggle. Because if not, then you will be confused and think that it's about changing the personnel of a particular state or voting for a donkey over or elephant. When basically, we are the ones that are going to be continually in the crosshairs of these kinds of backward policies. As long as we don't have the power to be able to not only defend ourselves, but to advance our interests. So let me just say one more thing in terms of understanding the context of this continued uh, absence of any kind of value that people place on Black life. The president of Ecuador was prepared, fully prepared to ignore the fact that it was quite clear that these kids, these children, came in contact with the military. The military was patrolling as an interventionist force in these communities, and when the communities were raising the questions, what happened to our children? They basically ignored them. It wasn't really until almost 2 weeks later when some forces, including the Black Alliance for Peace, began to tweet out, they began to raise this issue, that it began to catch fire. And then there was a very important article that came out in The Guardian. At that point, it was basically clear that we had a scandal on our hands. So we could talk more about that. I know you have a break coming up, and on the other side of that break.
Yeah, definitely. Because how I have questions. I always have questions, but we're going to get them answered absolutely on the other side of this break. So let's see what's going on in WPFW land that you can participate in.
What do Angela Davis, Mehdi Hassan, Ibrahim X. Kendi, V, formerly Eve Ensler, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, Sonia Sanchez, Amy Goodman, Medea Benjamin, Mossab Abu Toha, Congresswoman Cori Bush, Noura Erakat, Congressman Jamal Bowman, Farafina Khan, Linda Sarsour, Isra Shakir, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Sweet Honey in the Rock, and WPFW have in common? Well, Busboys and Poets 2025 Peace Ball, Voices of Justice and Liberation, an event featuring live music, speeches, performances, food, and drink. Details, including a complete list of speakers and performers, as well as how you can both support WPFW and join the fun on Saturday, January 18th, 8 p.m. at Arena Stage's Mead Center for American Theater, can be found at WPFWFM.org. That's WPFWFM.org. WPFW, building a better world, one broadcast at a time.
Thank you so much. So, Cloud, and I do want to come back to you, Ajamu, to address, the issue that you brought up. But you did say, Cloud, that these kind of disappearances have happened before. Mm-hmm. Why have we not heard of these things happening before?
Right. Well, so just 2 days ago was the 1 month anniversary of the boys' disappearance, and there was a community commemorative march through the neighborhood, through Las Malvinas, from their neighborhood to where their bodies were found, right? And which, interestingly enough, when we got there, I look up and, so it's a highway, and it said Puerto, one of the ports there, and that's the state-owned port, but military personnel are always near, ports. So that, from when I saw that, I was like, oh, interesting. This is, they're literally right by the base. And so they were found, that just happened 2 days ago. That was, but interestingly enough, it was also, I believe this was in the 80s, the case of two brothers, the Restrepo brothers, that I believe were Colombian cultural workers and were disappeared in Ecuador. So there were actually, many people that had been in a struggle, and actually apparently during the 90s was what Ecuadorians refer to as the decade of forced disappearances. Specifically around organizers, activists, journalists. So this is, again, this has happened before. But what is, now what is happening is oftentimes that these cases get brushed under the rug because it's particularly in poor communities, and the prosecutors or the government, the military, whatever, can pay off the families, and the case goes away. What has happened with this case in particular, one, these boys were truly beloved in their community, and hundreds of people came out to this commemorative march, which is called the Chihualo, and it's an ancestral cultural practice that's specific to when a child dies. So it's both, there's always drums, right? There's singing, there's culture in it, but there's also a community outcry, particularly in this case, because these children should not have died. And it was at the hands of the state in which this happened. And to add insult to injury, everything else that has happened, right? The defense minister coming out, he did have to apologize 2 days ago in public for making these veiled threats. But regardless, right, the interior minister is also appealing the charges that the judge, right, that the judge ordered. So there's a lot of work with the government is definitely working to make this an isolated case and go away. But what is also happening is that it's a month away from the elections. Right? Of course, they want to make this news go away. But of course, if this is the policy, and one of the demands of these organizations and families is around having an actual public debate around what this security and militarization plan is, Plan Phoenix, right? Which is, has right now Ecuador is in a state of exception, and it's going to be, I believe it just started maybe like 4 days ago, and it's for 60 days, goes through past the election, right? In the state of exception, there are no rights that they even need to, they don't need any sort of warrant to, stop anyone.
So is the state of exception like a martial law almost?
Martial law.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Right. So this is what we see with this militarization, not just in the country, in the region, that it is our communities that are at, the target of this criminalization. As Ajamu mentioned before, it is not just, in Ecuador, in the region, in the US, in colonized there, right? We are at war, but it is one that has been visited upon us, for whether it's making space for military bases, for US bases to extract resources, to have a puppet when it comes to international maneuverings, right? Ecuador was very pivotal in pushing for the multi-purpose security mission in Haiti, and trying to push it towards the UN peacekeeping mission, right? So they need these puppets in the region, these neo-colonial puppets that are willingly and happily selling out their country for private interests, for US military interests, and geopolitical reasons as well. Right, the Galapagos Island it's right off the Pacific Ocean there, and one of the things that we're seeing is that there's active proliferation of military bases up and down the Pacific Ocean, as the US is trying to ready the battlefield for war with China.
While I'm sure it's in the process of decimating all of that biodiversity, unique biodiversity on the Galapagos Islands. So basically consider that gone too, y'all. Ajamu, I am thinking of the war on drugs here in the United States, because that's what we know, right? And we are still living with the legacy of the war on drugs. And everybody who's listening, who knows me, you understand, you know my story. So you know this is personal to me. But why should this story be personal to all of us, Ajamu? Not just those of us who have had experience with, with intimate experience with what the war on drugs really is. Why should we in the United States care about these 4 boys in a place that most people have never heard of, can't point to Ecuador on a map? But why should we be concerned about these 4 Black boys killed by the Ecuadorian military?
I would say first because we're human beings. And as human beings, we can empathize with other human beings who are subjected to oppression, to injustice, to suffering, to death. But I think that makes it even more personal for us, because not only are we human beings, but we are specific human beings created by specific historical conditions. And like those Africans in Ecuador, we have Africans throughout the Americas, Africans on the African continent, Africans in Europe and in North America, who still are not able to fully experience, to enjoy their fundamental human rights, their right to live dignified lives, their right to live in peace. And so we understand that gives us a common interest in defeating those forces that are responsible for the death of these boys, not only there in Ecuador, but also in North America, on the south side of Chicago, in New York, in Memphis, where 5 or 4 pigs beat a brother to death. So when we recognize our common humanity, our common interests, and then we trace it to a common source, then we lay the foundation for the possibility of transnational African and anti-colonial struggle. And that is the kind of connections that we have to make. Cloud shared that the Black Alliance for Peace is working very intimately with one of the main Black organizations in the country. We're doing that out of our sense of responsibility. The requests we've been making to provide support to African people who are trying to organize themselves in ways similar to what we are doing in the U.S. And again, our recognition of the commonality of our struggle. So in Ecuador, in anticipation of and experiencing concretely the consequences of this planned Phoenix, which is supposed to be, again, a war on crime effort that would then, again, disproportionately being negatively impacted in our communities. That is, our communities being negatively impacted by this war, so-called war on drugs. And we recognize that the war on drugs is a convenient instrument used by the oppressors to basically keep their knee on our necks collectively. We have a lot of experience with that in North America. And it's important people understand that this is the mantra that's used not just in North America, not just in this case in Ecuador, but across this region, and even in other places where you find Africans who are still in a minority or colonized, that we are the perpetual criminals that are in which extraordinary force and violence need to be used in order to control and to contain us. So this is the connection. Malcolm said, you can't understand Mississippi if you don't understand the Congo. You can't understand the Congo if you don't understand Mississippi. Malcolm understood the importance of an anti-colonial perspective, an anti-colonial mentality, an internationalist perspective. So even though we call ourselves the Black Alliance of Peace, we're not pacifists. We recognize that there is a fundamental connection between peace and human rights, and that we're not going to be able to protect our human rights, we're not going to be able to assert our collective rights until we identify those forces responsible for creating situations or conditions where peace is impossible.
Mm.
So we fight. We say, we take seriously, no justice, no peace. Okay. And so that's what we're doing. We are helping to try to build an international response. We are trying to help to build a powerful, effective Black liberation process that transcends the US. And that's what they're trying to do now in Ecuador with the Mane process, building for the first time a coherent and unified Black liberation process in Ecuador.
I like that description that we are building a Black liberation process. I love that. And yes, I am a member of the Black Alliance for Peace too. For those of you who are listening who didn't know, full disclosure, yes, I am. I'm always going to have members of this formation on this show as guests when I do. Not, I am biased, I am partial, but I'm partial to people who do the work. So that is why I have, because these are people I have learned from. These are people I look up to. So if I think they're special, I think you should have access to them too, so they can be special to you as well. Because what we are talking about here today is something that Ajamu mentioned, that we talked about also. Clau also mentioned it. It's a big deal with us, and it's the idea of human rights. I think, though, Ajamu, in this country, I don't think we know what they are. So
No,
help people understand what human rights are, and help us understand why it is that we should be fighting toward, and not some other piecemeal things that we think are liberation but are actually not.
well, for us, human rights are those elements that define and characterize human dignity, the things that we need to live a dignified life. So simple things that when they are not in abundance, where you don't have access to them, can be very detrimental, like the human right to food, the right to a clean environment, the right to be healthy, which means to have health care, the right to education and to be able to develop yourself, to be able to realize your full human capacities. These are the kinds of rights that define who we are and define us as human beings. The problem we have, though, is that we live in a world and in societies in which those basic rights are not are not recognized. In the U.S., there's no basic right to those rights, no basic recognition of those rights as human rights. That's why we can have close to 1 million people every day who don't know where they're going to lay their heads because there is no fundamental right to housing.
Mm.
So these are the things that we have to fight for and recognize the connection between the absence of these rights and the predatory relationships that we have between ourselves and the oppressor class and the oppressor nation. That one of the reasons why we don't, and the main contradiction denying our ability to live in a way in which we can have human rights is because we live in a world that is dominated by capital,
Mm.
is dominated by a system of governance and economics that undermine our ability to fully realize our human rights. And therefore, we make the connection that not only with peace can we experience human rights, but we have to recognize that if we don't eliminate this system of exploitation and oppression connected to this capitalist imperialist system, then human rights will be impossible. But we can't get our human rights, folks, by begging the enemy. We
Mm.
are working with Monet, and we're building this process in the U.S. and other places because we recognize we have to build power. We have to have the ability to defend ourselves. If there was no ability to defend themselves in Palestine, then the genocidal process would have been completed by now. But the Palestinian resistance had the ability to, in fact, defend themselves. They're paying a horrific price, but they are, in fact, defending their fundamental collective rights. We have to build the same kind of capacity because we are up against a lunatic, vicious enemy that is waging war against all of us. And we can't play with this, folks. This is the reality that we are facing. So building effective organizations that recognize the context we are in and are committed to building our process, that's where we have to be in 2025.
And I want to close this discussion out by asking you, Clau, what do the people in Guayaquil, what do they want from us? What can we do to help them? You've talked to them, you've met with them, you've been in, in a community with the organization there. What are their marching orders or their requests of us to support them?
Yeah, I mean, for one, even just getting the word out on the story and internationalizing the efforts, right? So whether it's through media work support or movement support work, right? As we are building out structures in the global South, also building similar structures in the North, right? In the colonies, it was within the U.S. And North America, where Africans are, colonized peoples are, to link those struggles first and foremost, right? And to really build that power, as Ajamu was saying, that we have to respond if it's a war that's been waged upon us, right? And the only way really to do that is through internationalizing the struggle, truly.
Thank you all both so much for joining me today on this very important Darker Than Blue. We will stay on top of this story, obviously, because it is not over. Plan Phoenix, and it's F-E-N, is it two N's? N-N-I-X? One N, F-E-N-I-X. You all are going to have to look that up. You got to do a little bit of homework. Thank you, Clau and Ajamu, for joining me. I want to leave you all. I said I'm committed to doing this year, so I'm going to do it. Here's your history tidbit for January 10th. It's 1942, the Lee Street Massacre. In describing the origins of the Lee Street Massacre, Matthew Touch writes, a month after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Black soldiers from Camp Claiborne in central Louisiana went to the town of Alexandria on Saturday, January 10th, 1942, for some R&R. Most of the soldiers were from the North, and on that night, a Black soldier supposedly stepped in front of a car driven by a white woman. The woman called the police instead of just driving her behind on, and the shooting started. Previously burned to the ground by Union forces following the Civil War, the town of Alexandria remained a hotbed of racism and Jim Crow violence in the 1940s, with several military bases nearby. See, keep telling y'all all this stuff is connected, and history just confirms it for us. A local police often relied on the assistance of military police during weekends when soldiers were permitted off base. In 1940, Alexandria had a population of more than 27,000 people, and nearly half were African American. There were only 17 Black registered voters in the entire city. In the 55 years between Reconstruction and the Second World War, many moved out, but in central Louisiana, almost everything remained still. The primary difference was that in 1942, unlike 1877, the region's white establishment welcomed the federal government. It was here that on the night of January 10th, 1942, a white military police officer incited a riot that allegedly resulted in at least 10 and as many as 15 Black soldiers killed and dozens more injured outside of a movie theater in the middle of downtown on a street named in honor of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. The area surrounding the massacre was quickly cordoned off, and government and media reports of the incident remained vague and inconclusive, with no one knowing the exact number of people killed or injured, no one being held accountable. Oral histories of those present that night continue to contradict official accounts. the commemoration of a historical marker for the event noted, hopefully the full truth of what actually happened on that never to be forgotten night will come out one day. With this bronze marker, we are both remembering and honoring the soldiers injured and the soldiers who may have died that night so long ago, as well as now committing ourselves to be a better people. And no. They're not committing themselves to being better people because they haven't told the truth about this incident since it's happened. Because the soldiers, the 15 soldiers who were killed were Black, they were unarmed, and it was just because the white soldiers were mad. That's it. So once again, y'all, history proving that there is nothing we can do to prove ourselves worthy of being accepted in this American system. Because even when you put their uniform on and go to battle for them, when you come back here, they will still see you as their enemy. That's it for Darker Than Blue on this Friday, January 10th. See you next week. Be good to yourselves and each other. Peace if you're willing to fight for it. A luta continua. The struggle continues, but I promise, if you keep fighting, Victoria acerta. Victory is certain. Peace.
No compromise, no retreat.
That too.
We people who are darker than blue.
Alrighty, folks. Just a quickie, because I'm going to be, let me see which one am I closing down. I'm gonna stop sharing that. There we go. Okay. Just a quickie. I'm gonna try not to cuss as much in 25. I don't know why. I don't know why I keep saying, I don't know why. I enjoy my fucking cussing a lot. I do, because as my dad says, ooh, it's cussing time. It's cussing time. So I will be in Colombia with Comrade Ajamu next week, starting Monday. And I'm really excited about that. I'm going to be in Colombia with Ajamu and Anthony Rogers Wright. I love how he says his O's. It's so great. He pronounces his name Anthony Rogers. It's like the O is almost a long sound. It's very cute. But I'm so glad to be getting out of here. I don't even care that I have to fly on Spirit because I don't have that much money. I don't even care. I don't even care. I am really considering just going with the clothes on my back and my laptop. And whatever else I need, I'm just giving drawers, shoes, clothes. I just buy that shit there. I want to get out of here so bad. I want out of this place. And I'm very afraid that I'm gonna enjoy myself so much. Because when I went the first time, I was grieving. It was a different time. I was really, I enjoyed myself, but it was in a very particular and specific context. And it was a spiritual exercise. And I was being rebuilt, right? My spirit was being rebuilt. So there was other stuff going on. I was not in a, ooh, look at all the beautiful things kind of. No, I was in a, I am nothing. And I was being really, really built up by, and it was really beautiful. But yeah, but now this y'all, can I just say, I have been trying to figure out, like, why am I feeling, and that is how I've been feeling. I have not been able to put a word to it. I haven't been able to describe it, but I've been like sitting around kind of feeling like, I don't know what this is. What is this? It's a very uncomfortable, unsettled feeling. It's not, I don't feel anxious. I'm not afraid. I'm not worried. And that's the thing. Like, this is the first time, I think, in 10 years, at least, that I have not been hyper vigilant because there is a crisis going on that I have to manage so that I can survive. This is the first time in at least 10 years that I am not afraid for the phone to ring. I'm serious. And I don't know how I am. Everything that has happened to me in the past few years has changed me, has made made way for a new whatever it is that is happening, a transformation. But I don't know I don't know what is happening. But I just kind of realized a couple of days ago, like, man, I am sitting here kind of twiddling my thumbs because this is the first time in a while that I have not felt on edge because something bad is happening. Something bad has happened and I'm having to manage the fallout, or something bad is about to happen. And I just don't know how bad it's going to be, but it's coming, right? There is, woo, when I tell you that practically every month of the past 10 years has been like that for me, I am not kidding. I'm not kidding. And I get what stress can do. I get it. I understand because not having that stress, I see what feeling free feels like. Like you wake up in the morning and so I wake up in the morning and it's like and I don't wake up and lay there and go, maybe I can work the rest of this out today and I can get this thing out of the way today. Maybe I can finally get to the end of this situation today. You know what I mean? And I can move this out of the way. And then I can move this out of the way so I can finally handle this other thing that I had to push out of the way because I'm dealing with this every month. There has not been a month. Probably there, and maybe there were one or two over the past 10 years where yes, and that means yeah, because you marry their family. And I am bad at asking for help. I'm bad at telling people how I'm doing. I'm bad at letting people into my life. Um, I'm bad at trusting. I don't trust you. I don't trust you. I don't care how much you say you love me. I don't trust you. And I know some of y'all are in here like, what? Say what? You don't trust. I'm just saying, this is the me that trauma built. So now this trauma me, all of these scales and the armor and the defense mechanisms and the protection processes and the walls that I put up to keep people from hurting me, they're slowly being dismantled by not needing them anymore. And I didn't realize that number one, I didn't realize I had so many of it up, had so much of it up. And number two, I didn't know that I didn't need them anymore. I did not know that I didn't know that I'm safe. Do you understand? And not knowing that you're safe means that at some point you didn't know that you weren't safe until you had to make yourself safe in the middle of an unsafe situation. And that's what my life has been for a little while. That was what my life was when I was a kid, when I was little. You know, that was what my life was when I was in high school. You know, where we all go through the high school traumas, especially if we're girls, we go through the high school traumas with the mean girls and all this kind of shit. And some of us are able to let that stuff go. Me, I remember every time somebody laughed at me, every time. And I don't know why that is. I actually don't like that about me, but it's true. I remember every trauma like it happened yesterday. And that's why I have to take medication to stop my brain from doing this to myself, to make it harder for me to get around all of this stuff that I have had to erect to protect myself because of trauma. And see, I'm willing to tell you that this is what I'm going through, because I'm not crazy. I know doggone well some of y'all are going through this too. I know doggone well some of y'all are having the same kind of issues, and you are so afraid that something is wrong with you. Or, oh my God, am I going crazy? I'm not going to tell you you're not, because I can't entirely guarantee that I'm not. I am. See, I know, Tay. I understand. Look, I'm not the only one. I'd be looking at I sat in this house over this holiday and didn't do any holiday stuff because it's genocides going on, and how you gonna celebrate? I couldn't celebrate, so I spent a lot of time just thinking about the last year or two, really the last 2 years, and thinking about all of the people who were absolutely here for me. And I mean, y'all, I cannot thank you all enough. I can't. And you all know who you are. You are 3 of y'all in this chat right now. There are 3 of you who I would give everything for, because I watched y'all drop everything and come and help me. And you do not know what that means to me. You don't understand that for the rest of your life, you can't never get rid of me. I don't care what happened. I don't care what you do. You can't never get rid of me now. But I've also had to remember people who I thought would have my back who didn't. And I had to remember my Abdus's words that he could not take, he couldn't listen to for himself. But he did tell me, he said, baby, if you want to be happy, you're going to have to let some of these motherfuckers who really don't give a damn about you go. He's like, Jackie, a lot of these people in your face, grinning in your face, talking about, oh, Jackie, I love you so much. That's literally what he did. So we were sitting having dinner in the living room, you know, when I was trying to get him to eat dinner at the living room table like an adult instead of in the bedroom in front of the TV. So that's why I put the television in the living room, because I got tired of arguing with him about, look, we're not children. We're not having dinner in the bed no more. So, so we're sitting at the table having dinner. And I can't remember what it was, but we were talking about, you know, the issues that we both have and how similar our betrayals. Because Abdus and I had very similar upbringings. It was uncanny. It was really uncanny how alike our childhoods were. It was wild. So, you know, we're talking about this stuff, and we're talking about all the people that we encountered who betrayed us and how they affected us, and how, man, I still remember the day that mug said blah, blah, blah to me. And I remember how it felt. And, you know, I'm telling him, yeah, I remember the day, you know, my best friend, I found out that she was screwing the guy that she knew I liked, and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And we get up to the present day and the people that we are organizing with. And at the time we were in an organization. It wasn't BAP. This was before BAP. We were in an organization. I think I told y'all about these people, these Black soldiers people with this. Now I can't remember his name. I can't remember his name now, but con artist, absolute con artist. And you know, this dude, woo, this dude was, he's all in our face. He's all in Abdus's bait. Oh, y'all are it. Y'all are going to take us to where we need to be. Y'all, you know, the couple that this is it. Yeah, y'all, you got the skills. Oh, just pouring it on and pouring it on. And he turned out to be a con artist in both Abdus and I. But more so for him, he really had to let that man go. Because when we realized he was a con artist who was taking advantage of the young women who were in the organization. And there were chapters in other states. And then when we realized that he was taking an advantage of us and the money that we were putting into the organization, we were the only people who were paying dues. And we were paying for other people to, do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm sitting here telling him about, you know, how I felt Like this man, he came into our house and he disrespected us. And I was ready to go to jail. This man gonna disrespect you in our house and blah, blah, blah. And I wish he would call it. I'm just going on and on about how this man and his betrayal really upset me. And Abdus is like, and it was funny because I knew he was still kind of chatting with the dude on Facebook, because Abdus could never let people, as much as he would tell me to do it, he could not do it. He was so very much about always wanting to not give up on the good in people. And I got it, because so many people had given up on him. I understand that. I get it. So that was something about him that I tried to kind of work it out with him, but then I realized, no, that's just who he is. And if he stops being that way, then he stops being who he is. And I can't do that. So, but he did. He was just like, look, these people going to be all up in your face for the whole time. Well, however long this thing lasts that we're doing, he said that, Jackie's going to be a lot of people in your face. A lot of people in your face. They're going to be telling you how wonderful you are and how much they love you. And, oh, you're so smart. You're so this. You're so that. And more than half of those people are going to stab you. Not in the back. They're going to stab you in your fucking chest. And he said what you need to do when they do that, and when you see them all the time in your face, you need to turn around and walk the fuck away from those people, because all they are is talk. And he told me, he said, Jackie, don't pay any attention to what anybody says to you. Watch what they do, especially when you need something. Watch what they do. Don't pay any attention to what people say. Watch who comes to help when you finally say, oh, I need help. And sure enough. So those of y'all in the chat who know who you are, oh, now it's 4 of you. You know who you are. But I also watched people who I thought would be supportive, not. And not in the most extreme case. Like, I'm not talking about when I was recovering from surgery. I'm talking about everything else. And it's more than one person. It's a whole bunch of people. When they saw that I was being disrespected by folks, when they saw that I was being lied about, when they saw that people were waging a campaign against me on Twitter, flat out lying about me, it was a whole bunch of people who kept silent. And I noticed people who don't stand up for the truth. Now, if people don't want to stand up for me, okay, fine. But you're not going to stand up for the truth? You don't ever have to defend me. Cool. But the truth, you're not going to defend the truth? Okay. All right. Yeah, I've been very disappointed by that. Yeah, that's been wild. But I've had to remember what not just Abdus, but my mama. And if you think I cuss a lot, I get it from her. Because my mama will be quick. That woman was quick to be like, I wish that motherfucker would. I wish he would talk to me like that. I bet he won't. Not after what I told him. I bet he won't talk to another motherfucker the way he talked to me. My mama was cussing people out at the Department of Labor in every office. Her whole career. And she didn't, and the day she died, the memorial service that they had for that woman at the Department of Labor was in one of the big conference rooms, the ones with the wall that divides the room. They had to open the divider because they had to fill up both sides. They filled up both sides of the room for a memorial for her. That's how much they loved that woman. And she worked there for 25, 30 years. And she was always cussing people out. And they would tell me, your mother is a ball of fire. Are you a ball of fire too? And I'm like, I have no idea. I had no idea that I actually was a ball of fire. I was just a ball of fire in the making. I was a little ember. That's what I was. I was a little ember. So yeah. The past few years have been very difficult. They've been very stressful. Y'all, I have merely hinted at all of the things. I have not talked about everything, and I never will talk about everything because everything doesn't need to be talked about. You get the idea. I just don't like for people to think that there is anything. I tell so much of my business because I hate to see us suffering when I know we have so much work to do. Some of us are struggling with stuff that if we just felt comfortable enough to tell somebody that we trust, oh my God, this is what I'm going through, we would be so relieved just to know that we don't have to carry it ourselves. And I hope that y'all know that you can tell me some things, but you should be, please don't carry this shit alone. It is only going to kill you. I don't, and this is kind of what I had to think about as I was looking at my own behavior. Like, what was I trying to prove? Not asking for help when I needed it. Like, I understood that there were some things I wasn't going to tell people about why I needed, help and support for some things. I wasn't going to tell Abdus's business. I wasn't going to, but I should have reached out for help for myself. But I was so focused on trying to help my husband be healthy. And so I've learned, how important putting my own damn mask on is. And I know we say this to ourselves and to each other all the time, but we don't do it. We don't do it, especially when it comes to somebody we love. Because you're not going to tell me if your child, if your baby is in dire need of help and support, you're not going to take the time to put your own mask on. You going, the person you love, yeah, you want them to be okay. So I wasn't thinking about how okay I was not. And I wasn't. And I wasn't for a long time. And there are still parts of me that are not okay. There are still days when I drive around this city and I find myself at a stoplight and I realize I am in an area of the city. I am on a street that holds so many bad memories that I am all of a sudden anxious. All of those memories come flooding back. And that happens. It doesn't happen a lot. It doesn't happen every day. Probably doesn't happen every week. It happens a couple of times a month. DC ain't that big. I just happen not to go out all that much. So I'm still dealing with that. The studio in the basement where Abdus died, where I found him, that's still a storage room, basically. I keep saying I'm going to clean that up. I'm going to put my sewing stuff in there because I got to take my clothes in because I lost all this weight. And maybe I'm going to start sewing again. I put my little sauna down there and I go down there and do my little sauna thing for 20, 30 minutes, a couple of times a week. But otherwise, I can't go in that room. I cannot go in that room and do anything. Because that is the last place I saw my husband. And he wasn't alive. That is the place where I performed CPR on my husband until the EMTs came. That's the place where our dog laid next to my husband's body. And I believe that Brewski was with him as he transitioned. So every day I'm in this house, I'm thinking about it. I don't think about it every day, but I just think about it on a regular basis. I really should go down there and clean that stuff out and there's always something that's like, no, I can't do it today. I mean, at least I can go in the room where I couldn't do that before. For a year after he died, that first year, I could not go in that room until 2023. 2020. No. Yeah, no. It was almost 2 years until the beginning of 2023. And then I was able to slowly just kind of clean stuff out and all of that kind of stuff. And here's the thing. Thank you for saying that, Red Sea. But here's the thing. I'm not. And I don't want to be. Because the only way you are strong is if you have to go through some hell. That's the only way people say that you are strong, is they see you going through hell. I never wanted to go through hell. I didn't want to be strong. I wanted to be married to my bear, living in a cabin in the woods, feeding bears and wolves, and becoming Mr. and Mrs. Grizzly, the black Mr. and Mrs. Grizzly Adams or whatever of the revolution, being the what did we call ourselves? The off the grid woodsy black gorillas. That's what I wanted to be. That is what I wanted. That is literally all I wanted. I wanted a cabin in the woods with my man, with my bear, and for us to have a garden in the woods that we ship food to our people. And by garden, I do mean a giant fucking multi-acre farm where we ship food to our people. He's a truck driver. He's going to get a fleet of trucks. We're going to have our pack of dogs and feed the bear and the deer and the squirrels. And feed the revolution from a secret wooded location. Yep, and by a lake, because I have to be near water. I never want to be. I don't want to be strong. I don't want to be. I don't. I don't. I want to be happy. And I wanted to be happy with Abdus. And I can't have that now. So I don't know what happiness will look like for me, but I know that I have to make it. That's a little scary because I've never looked at myself as a source of anything positive, really. I never thought I was smart. I never thought I was pretty. I never thought I was, yeah. Childhood trauma does that to your self-esteem. Especially when you grow up with colorism, with classism, and you grow up in a poor family, and you grow up around people who are indoctrinated into imperialist, capitalist, white supremacist thinking, So yeah, this period of time has been very interesting for me because I realized that for the first time in at least one decade, I don't have a crisis that I have to survive. I mean, I don't have a job, but I don't want one. Like, I need money. Yes, I'm still disabled. I'm still on disability. I'm still eligible for disability because of the kidney transplant. Still, doing very well from my kidney. Talked to my doctor today. Talked about a few weird things going on. She's like, "That's fine. It's okay. It's no big deal. We can take one of the, take one less of the major capsules and see how that works." And or take some, what did they say, Imodium, because I'm having GI stuff, and that happens with kidney transplant patients sometimes. And that is a side effect of one of the medications that I have to take, that I'm going to have to take for the rest of my life. And then sometimes when you just get older, sometimes older people just develop GI issues. Oh my God, it's always something. It is, but it's not a crisis, right? It's not like, oh my God, I need to have another surgery kind of crisis. No, it's just, oh, this is a weird thing that's happening because this other crisis happened that you got through. So it's like, I'm not worried about it. It's like, oh, I can feel things happening when they are happening, and that's not usual. And it's just started happening after the surgery, and I'm like, yeah, that kind of happens. It's okay. So they're not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. you know, but I have not known how to handle not having anything to worry about. And I didn't even realize that's why I felt so weird, because I don't have anything to worry about. I just paid off the car. I just paid off the car note. So that means in by February, the fucking thing's probably gonna break down. And I'm gonna probably have to do a GoFundMe. But I just paid off the car note. Um, I don't have a whole lot of bills. They're pretty much under control. I just killed another mouse because the mice are in here eating my plants. So, the dog is great. I don't know where he is. I think he's in the room on the bed monitoring traffic in the neighborhood because that's what he does. That's his job. He alerts me to all of the goings on out in the street in the neighborhood. So I don't have a lot to worry about. Nothing's wrong. Nothing's bad. My aunt just had open heart surgery, emergency open heart surgery a month ago, and she's doing fantastic. I don't have a lot to worry about. And that's just not normal for me. So that's been very hard for me to deal with. And I know that sounds weird. I know that sounds weird, but that's true. And I've been very anxious, not having a reason to be anxious. So I just kind of decided, you know what? I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna get out of here for a couple of weeks. And I'm just gonna go have a good time. And I'm gonna enjoy myself in Colombia this time. I'm gonna have fun. I'm not gonna do anything serious. I'll see how long that lasts. I'll see, because I'm gonna be there with Ajamu and Anthony. So who knows? But yeah, and I'm gonna try very hard to take a little trip somewhere. Doesn't have to be far away, but just to get away once a quarter, just to take better care of myself than I have been, because that's what everybody is kind of telling me that this period is for me to take care of myself much better than I have been, and to focus on the thing that is in front of me that I really have to do, that was really given to me, and that was writing this book. So that's whew, yeah, that's it. So yeah. That's why this year is already not looking, but it's already feeling very different. But I think that I do have a worry about this trip to Colombia, and the worry is that I won't come back. I really do feel like I really do not like this place so much that I can see myself. I can see sitting in Ajamu's house. and if we didn't have to come back for a CC retreat, I wouldn't. It would be even more possible if we didn't have a CC retreat that we had to be at Saturday, the day after we come back. I could see myself sitting in his house, him looking at me. Aren't you going to the airport? Nope. But I thought you were going back. Well, I thought so too, but I have changed my mind. When can we start looking for apartments for me? But since we got a CC retreat that the last weekend in this month, I'll come back. I'll come back for that. But in May, when I go to Cuba, so yeah, that's where I am in 2025. the work that we have to do is the same as the work that we've been doing. It is just as necessary and important now more than ever, probably more now than ever. The work that we have to do, it is critical. So the work that I am doing with BAT, that's never going to stop. That is never going to stop. But I do have to take some time to pay more attention to myself, because I can't function. I'm no good to the movement if I'm not healthy myself. And I recognize that. And I realize how unhealthy I have been. And the only way I realized how unhealthy that I have been is that I had this little moment, this few brief months of peace, quiet, and calm, where the phone rings and I am not afraid of picking it up because of what the person on the other end is going to say. Where I'm not afraid to look at my bank balance because, I'm not afraid that all my money's going to be gone. I'm not afraid that I'm not going to have enough money for groceries. I don't have to worry about, I can't talk to X, Y, and Z about this problem because I've already heard my business that I told them from that other thing from 4 or 5 other people. You know what I mean? So that's it. I mean, I think I feel more hopeful and more positive than I know how I have felt in the last few years. Yeah, definitely. And that's been unusual too. So I'm just going to go with the flow and see where this takes me. I'm going to focus on writing this book, and I'm going to make it the best that I can, even as I struggle with self-doubt, imposter syndrome. What's that other thing? It's this thing where you're so afraid of failing that you either don't try new things or you start things and you don't finish. So if that's any of you, me too. And I'm working through it. And I intend to write this book as I fight all of that within me, because I have to fight it, because I have to defeat it, because it is self-doubt and negative self-talk that I have been feeding myself my whole goddamn life. And I can't live unless I get rid of it. I know that now. I know that some of this has come from within me. Not the way people have treated me. No, that's them. That's them and their bullshit. But the way I look at myself, with no grace and no kindness and a lot of criticism, yeah, that's me. That's a result of the trauma, yes, but that's in me. And I have got to get that out of me, because I'm not a superhero, but I'm certainly not as bad as I have in my head that I am. And neither are you. Neither are any of you. There is somebody watching, listening, sitting there saying, oh my God, why is she in my head talking about how I think about myself? You don't need to raise your hand. I'm not going to call you out. Don't need to put it in the chat. I don't want you to put it in the chat. I just want you to know that you are not alone. You are not the only one who's having to deal with your own negative self-talk and fighting with yourself about yourself. We are going to win this fight. We are. And we're going to win it together. You'll see. Just watch. That's it for me for today. I'll see y'all next week from Colombia. Woohoo! I'll see y'all soon. Peace.